Welcome to the Power of Design podcast. My name is Jack Osa. I'm an architect, born and raised in Colombia, South America. Years ago, I migrated to the United States to follow my dreams. And today, I'm the founder and principal of Osa Studio, a multidisciplinary architectural design firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. In this podcast, we talk about design, business, creativity, and the inspiration we need to create an exciting and powerful built environment.
In today's episode of the Power of Design podcast, we have Courtney Fain. She is Vice President, Workplace Planning and Strategy at JLL. Enjoy it.
Hey, Courtney, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
Good.
A crazy day. I haven't started my list. You know, I'm a list person.
I am too.
I make list every day. I make a list for the week, and then I make a list every day.
That's impressive.
Yes.
Okay.
But I haven't started.
I see that you have a lot of open boxes on your checklist.
So I'm actually looking forward to start my list for this week tomorrow because it's been a lot of fires.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. See, I see you're using a notebook for your list.
Yeah.
I've always been a paper person.
Good.
And then I have tried in January of every year for probably the past 5 years. I'm going to be more digital. You can see I brought an iPad. I did not even bring paper.
Nice.
I got this Apple Pencil yesterday from my sister because she said she didn't use it. I'm like, well, might as well give it a try.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be more digital, but it's just really hard to break the paper.
I know. I love technology, and I go back and forth.
I know.
You know, sometimes I use technology, but paper is just so good.
Yeah, it is so good.
Good. How was your day today?
I don't even remember. It started in Valentine. No, it started with taking the kids to the bus and then to daycare. And that's always stressful. And then Valentine, and then went uptown, which is where my office is. I don't even know. My list, I almost have stopped making lists because I wasn't checking everything off. And so I kind of cheat lists. Sometimes I will make a list just with the things I know that I can check off, and then the things I need to do. That was kind of one of those days. I couldn't tell you all the things I got done, but I think it's been a good day. It's 70 degrees in February, so I'll take that. Oh yeah,
that's nice. Cool. Well, I'm very excited, about talking to you today. I've known about you for a while, and I know we
That's
met
scary.
not too long ago. Our industry and our circle is very small. And I know you have done a lot of good things for, the industry, for our community, and I just looking forward to learn more about all those great things you're doing.
Good. I hope I can deliver.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me about yourself? Where are you from? And kind of that path of getting to where you are today.
Okay. I am from Charlotte, actually. Hold on. I just dropped my little tip. I was playing with this is why you don't have technology.
Yes.
This is why you don't do it, because you can have things you fiddle with. Apparently the tip comes off this thing. So I'm actually born in Charlotte and moved around a lot growing up. So born here, moved to Raleigh, North Carolina when I was 2, Charleston, West Virginia when I was 4, started kindergarten in West Virginia. It's actually a beautiful state. I think that they get a lot of shit. It's a beautiful place. And then I was back in Charlotte for second semester of kindergarten. Was here through 7th grade, Atlanta for 8th, 9th, and 10th, Richmond, Virginia for 11th and 12th. Then I went to Georgia, University of Georgia for college. When I was and everyone always asks if my dad was in the military. No, Coca-Cola.
Oh.
So I feel like they're like, oh, military. I'm like, no, Coca-Cola.
Sure.
So worked for Coke Consolidated in Charlotte, and then the big company in Atlanta. And then when I was in Richmond for those last 2 years of high school, I met a guy who I am now married to. So I wouldn't necessarily say we are high school sweethearts, but we are high school friends we've known each other for a while, like 20 years.
Yeah.
So got married in 2012. So we've been married for almost 11 years.
Wow.
We have 2 girls. They are going to be 4 and 6 in April. So they remind me of that a lot. My younger one, her birthday is exactly 2 months from today.
Oh, wow.
And so she asked Google this morning,
Yes.
hey, Google, how many days until April 15th?
Oh, yeah.
It's 59, just so you know.
Yeah, I guess she's going to ask every day.
Every day. Well, she forgot a couple times because she asked when it was 72 days left. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a long 72 days. Luckily, it hasn't been that bad. But then she remembered again today when I told her it's exactly 2 months. So you had 2 girls, 2 dogs who are also females, and they are hound dogs. And we live in Charlotte, kind of near like Cotswold, South Park area. So I don't plan on moving as much as my parents moved me around if we can help it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting back up to career stuff. So I went to Georgia, majored in interior design. Probably should have taken this as a sign so you have to apply. I'm sure it's probably like this at a lot of schools, but you have to apply to Georgia itself. You get into Georgia, and then once you get in, you have to apply to a major.
Yeah.
So once I got in, I had to apply to the art school. So then I got into the art school, but that's I don't want to say it's easy, but if you're somewhat artistic, you're probably going to get into the art school. But then you have to declare a major. So then I wanted to do interior design. So you have to apply to interior design. And I feel like I always would just tell people, like, I changed my mind too late. The truth is, I did not get in the first time. Did not get in. That should have been my sign. I'm not good at interior design. And you can only apply once a year. You can only apply in the fall semester because it's such a small program.
Yeah.
So, no, spring semester. You can only apply in the spring semester. So I applied spring freshman year, didn't get in. I was dead set that's what I wanted to do. And so I ended up being at Georgia for 5 years, which is actually not uncommon, but a lot of people do 4.5 to get the extra football season, not the full 5. So that final semester, I was pretty lonely. But interior design was a rough major. I mean, you're an architect, so you know all the studio time. And one of the perks was our studio in Athens is in downtown near all the bars. So I would just pick up my roommates at 3:00 in the morning when I was heading back from the studio.
Perfect.
And they were having a great time and I was not. So I graduated because I did that victory lap. I should have graduated in 2008, which wouldn't have been much better. But then I graduated in 2009.
Yeah. Crappy
economy. It's funny when you hear like 22-year-olds now, like, is this the end? And I'm like,
right.
I'd rather take this than 08.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
All day.
Yes.
All day. I think we learned from some of our mistakes. So I nannied for 2 years for a family that they are 2 girls. Life full circle. They now, when they're home from college, babysit my children.
Oh, nice.
Which is just wild.
That's awesome.
And then my first job in the industry was working at an all steel dealership that was called McThrift.
Yeah.
Then Delve. It would, in present day, probably be the closest thing would be Interior Elements, but I don't think any of the same people are there.
Sure. And what kind of tasks did you have to do on that first job?
So also, I have to thank my sister for helping me get that job, that coveted first job. It was her job. So she was the designer.
Oh.
She was a designer there. And she got a job with All Steel to be the manufacturer's rep. And she was the only designer. And her boss was a guy named Jim Brookman, who people in the furniture industry would probably know. Big personality, big teddy bear. I love Jim Brookman, but he was freaking out that Emily was leaving. What am I going to do? And she's like, my sister can do it. She'll be really good. Just interview her and I'll train her. You don't even have to worry about it. And so he interviewed me and I think was highly skeptical.
Yeah.
But that was how I got into the industry. So I'm forever grateful to my sister. But also being the All Steel rep at an All Steel dealership, she needed me to succeed. So
sure,
it was kind of selfishly motivated.
Yeah.
And she could boss me around as she has my whole life.
Good.
Yeah. Older sister.
Interesting.
So my responsibilities there, laying out a lot of cubicles, some ancillary furniture, but I feel like in working with dealerships since then, now they're much more. I mean, I know that's still a lot of workstations, not cubicles, but it seems like it's more fun now. Maybe I'm misperceiving that, but it was a lot of just laying things out in CAD and then getting a spec sheet, and then you have to make sure that you have every single part. So if you're putting together a panel, there is the metal part inside that holds it up, and then there are the parts that go on the outside, and then there are segment kits, and there are trim kits, and there's all these things that go into making a single workstation, and you have to count them all. And I would lock myself in this conference room, and with my little Sharpie pack of highlighters, and if anyone came in there, I lost my mind. I was like, "Oh my God, I was almost done." So yeah, a lot of counting cubicles.
Did you like doing that kind of work?
No, I mean, no. At the time, no. But I was so thankful to have a job that used my major.
Sure.
I really liked the people I worked with. I liked that I worked with my sister, kind of. Mm-hmm. The work itself, no, not really. But I think it's so important to learn what you don't like too. Yeah. And I kind of had a pivotal moment there when I was on the phone with interior designer, and architecture firm out of Atlanta for a project we were doing. It's up in Davidson, MSC. It's, I think, like exit 30 off Davidson. It was a really big project. It ended up being my final project there. But I was talking to her for 30 minutes about the size of a cutout in the back of a credenza for the video equipment to be properly ventilated. And if you're bored hearing me say that, that is how I felt. I'm like, sure. I don't care about that. I thought I was detail oriented, but maybe I'm not necessarily. Just because I can focus on details doesn't mean that I have the longevity there. Yeah. So that's when I was like, I don't ever want to be a designer at an architecture firm. That's the sort of crap I have to focus on. Yes. So that is what I was doing there for 2 years. You want me to keep going on the journey? Yeah, keep going. Keep going on the journey. Okay. So 2 years in, I get married while I'm there, so that's exciting. And I was done. So I was the only designer for 4 salespeople doing like probably $6 million a year. It was a lot of work. Yeah. Which again, I cut my teeth. I learned so much from it. I now can see that in hindsight. Right. But I was burnt out. I mean, getting paid nothing. Mm-hmm. I was ready for the next adventure. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was looking on LinkedIn, and I saw a job at Little, Diversified Architectural Consulting, but that's a lot, so just Little. Mm-hmm. And it said space planner. I'm like, I didn't know you could have a job just doing space planning, but like that's the stuff I like. And I'm not good at design, but I love the whole more of the function and the analytical side. So I got an interview for that, and it ended up that it was really an occupancy planner job, which I'd never heard of occupancy planning either. And I'd be sitting on site with one of their clients, and made it through 3 interviews and then didn't get it. And I was like, oh man, I was so bummed. 6 months later, they called again. They're like, okay, we have another open position for an occupancy planner, and we'd like to talk to you about it. And they must have been so desperate because some of the questions they asked in my first interview, like, have you ever done occupancy planning? And I didn't say no, I've never even heard of it, but I just said no, I've not. Like, have you ever heard of CAFM, which I now know is computer aided facility management? I'm like, no, I've never heard of CAFM. And they're like, we can teach you that. So you're hired. I was so excited. Felt very grateful, felt wildly underqualified. Again, just thankful that they were going to take a chance on me. Mm-hmm. So I ended up being at Little for 8 years. I had so many different roles, learned so much. I feel like I could just talk about little in my time there for like
Sure.
an hour, but I won't do that because no one cares like I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was at Little for a very long time.
Yeah.
And started doing occupancy planning, realized that occupancy planning is awesome because that is the analytical, putting the puzzle together.
Yeah. So I don't know what that is.
You don't either?
No,
Okay,
tell
good.
me.
Good.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time so there's occupancy planning and workplace strategy. Took me a long time to really simplify the difference between the two. Workplace strategy is what I do now. But the workplace strategy is essentially how the people are going to work. So flexible work is a workplace strategy. I mean, there's obviously, you get a lot more detailed in there, but if a company decides our strategy is that we're going to be 2 people for every 1 seat and we're going to work this many days and our people really focus, so we need to have more focus spaces or more offices or whatever, come up with this whole strategy and say, this is what we need. This means we need 50,000 square feet for our 10-year plan, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Occupancy planning is basically the implementation of a strategy.
Okay.
So for this company specifically that I was doing it for, which it was always a confidential client, so I'm like still scared to say it, but it's just, it was a bank.
Yeah.
With a campus.
Yeah.
And their campus was built for 5,000 people and they had 6,000 people assigned to it, which is just laughable thinking now in 2023, how people would die to have that problem. It was like,
yes,
we don't have enough space for all these people showing up.
Yes.
But part of what that was the problem. The problem statement is how do we accommodate these people? And so the solution from the real estate strategy, the workplace strategy, was they were going to lease some more space on the other side of town to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And then they also were going to look at badging data because they had a really good remote work program, a really strong remote work program that you could enroll in, and they'd give you a stipend to help pay for internet and set up your home office and all that. And if you enrolled in that, then if you were part-time, AWS, alternative work, if you were part-time, then you got assigned a seat at like 2 to 1. You shared it with one other person.
Yeah.
If you were full-time AWS, you were not assigned a seat. So that strategy gave us an understanding of, okay, for these 5,000 people, we really only need, for these 6,000 people on this campus, we really only need about 5,000 seats, but that gives us no vacancy. So here are the ones that we can move to that other location, blah, blah, blah. And then the occupancy planners have to figure out how we're going to make that happen.
Right.
And fill in the holes of the Swiss cheese, because there's not, if marketing is the one that's growing like crazy, but all the vacancy is in a building way far away from marketing, then how do we get it so that the vacant seats are where they need to be to accommodate the growth?
Yeah.
That's the occupancy planning. It's like Tetris.
Oh, sure.
It's Tetris. It's so fun.
Yeah.
And no design skills required. I did have to do some AutoCAD space plans and all that, but I would say it fit my version of air quotes design.
So when you
more.
were doing occupancy planning, you found something that was more aligned with the way you think?
Yes, absolutely. That I never knew existed.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I think in design school, as soon as I graduated with a design degree, I was like, crap, that was a bad decision. And I feel like it made me kind of change my mind on that a little bit of, I don't know how it is for graduating people now, but I feel like when you graduate with such a specific major, you think, well, I have to go be an interior designer. And I think I probably should have realized the first time I didn't get in, I was not a good interior designer. So I didn't know it existed.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I call this podcast The Power of Design is because I see design not much as the end product, but as the process to get there.
Right.
And part of why I love architecture and design is because, architecture, I see it as the perfect combination between art and technique. You need all those skills together, and that whole spectrum of thinking to create a space, to create, a design for people to use. So you could be very big picture artistic, and you can be front-end designer. You could be a specifications writer. You can be a technical person.
There's so many parts to it.
Right.
There's
so many parts that I think every person will find a place in the profession depending on how they are, in their strengths, in their mind. And even more than that, I see it very very aligned with human experience because we're solving a human problem, which is space utilization, because we need to use space to do what we need to do. And I see it as the tension between, art and technique and your heart and your mind.
Yeah.
Because it's very, there is money involved. There are measurements. There is things that need to be exact. But you also need to dream. You need to, have vision. You need to be very abstract and then kind of materialize that into a specific buildable space for people to use.
Yeah, it's so true. And a space that's going to support all the ways that they work.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I love it. And I didn't know occupancy planning was a thing. So I got to do that for sitting on site with a client for 2 years. And then from there, I just kind of grew up in little. So ended up running the group. It was a national studio. So we had, there are 5 offices. And so I ended up being the national studio principal we had our workplace strategy arm, which was more of the workplace strategy, occupancy planning, change management. And then we had workplace technology, which was, and still is, like CAFM and IWMS implementation, workplace sensors. They were also starting to look into like different workplace experience apps. So all the stuff you need to understand your real estate portfolio, but we were also starting to get into more of like the experience within the office.
Yeah.
So there is, like you were just saying, the art and the technology. It's the strategy and the technology. They really kind of go hand in hand. So the thing we found though is at Little, I mean, this is more how I saw it, but FM Strategies is what the group was previously called. By the time I was doing this, it was called Workplace Consulting. And the group used to be all about like doing internal rent chargebacks and helping clients get a handle on their portfolio, sitting on site, things like that as real estate and technology has evolved, there are cheaper, more efficient ways of doing that. And so it became more of like a consultancy group instead of dedicated sitting on site like I was doing. Because also there are companies at that time that like JLL and CBRE and Cushman were starting to offer those services. Yeah. And from at least the way we saw it, kind of throwing it into part of a bigger package. So how do we charge, for example, $200 an hour to do something that a client doesn't necessarily feel like they're getting charged that from another company? Yeah. All that to say, the workplace technology at Little lived on and it still lives on, but our workplace strategy moved into the workplace interiors group for a lot of reasons. And I think they were the right reasons. And that means that I was back in design. I mean, studio principal, so not doing actual design, but around some of the most talented designers and most fun people and part of a bigger group, because our workplace strategy group was small. Yeah. But it was so fun being part of a bigger group. And I loved it. But I mean, I think COVID brought perspective to so many people. Everyone. I mean, I think it's probably an understatement. Everyone just kind of absorbed it in a different way. Sure. And my perspective was, I'm working at a design firm and I love the people and I thought that I would probably end my career there. But I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. Let's be real, I'm not a designer. So I don't have much, there's not much that I really can do here and feel like I'm doing it well at all, if that makes sense. Yeah.
But that's what you were thinking.
That's what I was thinking. Internally.
Right. From outside.
I shared this with a mentor of mine at Little. Yeah. And he was like, that is crazy. No, we can absolutely make this work. And I'm like, I don't think so. And I'm sure he knows that I'm stubborn. And normally when I've made up my mind, I've made up my mind.
Yeah. So what do you think are some of the unique ways you approach? And I don't think it's not going to be only your work, but your life, because, you have this pattern when you recognize, all right, I'm not satisfied with this. I need to switch to this. And now I need to do that. And I'm okay with doing whatever I need to do, even if it's new, and I'll do it. and then I do it again, and then I do it again. Where do you think that comes from?
Like, what is it that I'm finding, or where do you think that intrinsic kind of decision making? So yes. We all change. I mean, I feel like the positive change I've seen in myself, and I really credit a lot of this to, I think just it was formative years at Little, but they're very good at, I would say, questioning everything. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just changed the way I would think about things. But I mean, I've had a job since I was 15, if you count babysitting even earlier than that.
Sure.
So I've always just been, I want to work. And I think that I also know that you're not always going to like every aspect of work. Mm-hmm. And so I think I always kind of looked at it as a list. Let's go back to lists.
Yes.
Pros and cons.
Yes.
Of what are the things that are really good about this and looking towards the future and everything else. What are the things that aren't working? And as the cons list starts to get longer, I think that's when you start to see, like, are these cons deal breakers? And I said this to John Comison, my mentor, I remember saying, like, it's like when you're getting married. If he doesn't put the seat down, I can get over that.
Yes.
But if he in his off time decides that he's also going to like be a swinger, then that might be somewhere that we need to cut the cord, you know?
Yes,
and he was,
sure.
I'm sure he was probably thinking, what the hell? But he smiled and nodded. He was nice. So I think that that's where I'm starting to look at weighing those. And that is where more of that analytical black and white mindset comes in. Sure. Of there's a solution to every problem. I think it's also an understanding that nothing's going to be perfect.
Sure. But I think the value is because I think the analysis is pretty natural for most people, but the action taking and recognizing the decision and say, okay, I need to make a decision. But I think you growing up moving so much, you get used to a different environment.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That completely different environment. That
I've done it before, and
you've done it before.
Yeah.
I know that it's new, it's unknown, but I know I can do it because I've been doing it forever.
Yes.
It's not the end of the world.
And it is. I've always credited moving around so much to my loud and obnoxious personality that I always just had to make sure that people knew I was there. So maybe that's why I am the way I am. But I think you're exactly right, that it is. I thought I would have ended my career a Little, just like I say, I'll probably never move out of this house because the thought of it is so daunting. Yeah. But I'm not afraid to make the move if basically the data says it's time to do so. Sure.
Yeah. So what about that last move you made, the latest?
So now I'm at JLL. Mm-hmm. I've been here for a year and a half. Yes. And it was really scary. And while I think I was telling someone this the other day that when I left Little, I made a top 10 reasons, like David Letterman style, of why they should be excited that I'm leaving. Yes. I cannot now tell you all the 10 things that were on that list, but it did not take me long to make that list. So I still have it somewhere. Sure. But it was really hard to leave the people. I still keep in touch with the people, but I have no regrets in making the decisions. I feel like that's the first thing, is that luckily it was the right decision for me. I read an article, I don't know, someday this week, saying that, like 84% of people who are part of the 46 million people who were part of the Great Resignation, 84% of them regret leaving their job. And I was like, oh God, that sucks. Sure. So I thought about it this week. I'm like, okay, I don't regret leaving my job. Yeah. It is hard going somewhere new and restarting relationships and figuring out your new role. And also I kind of switched the part of the industry I was in. It's not like I just went from a design firm to a design firm. Mm-hmm. Went from a design firm to a commercial real estate company. And it's been a long learning curve, but I'm such a relationships people person that if the people are right, you can make everything else kind of mostly fall into place. And I think that that's been my situation at JLL is from the beginning of even talking about the job, so I do workplace strategy. Oh, I don't even, what's my official title? Workplace strategy and planning. That's it. And they've never had this role because JLL is a huge company. I've never worked at a huge company. That was a little scary. They're a huge company, but they have a lot of different verticals. And so while they have a lot of people that do workplace strategy, they didn't necessarily have someone ever before do workplace strategy that is aligned with just the brokerage group.
Yes.
And so they're like, this is going to be pretty gray. We're going to figure it out. And I loved that. Like, I don't want to I'm not going to be compared to the girl or the human before me and how they did it. Because when I was a nanny, going back to the beginning of my career, there was a nanny before me. And the girls in my first couple months, I'd always be like, I won't say her name. No one's going to know her, but let's say her name is Katie. They're like, well, Katie did it this way. And Katie did that. I'm like, I don't freaking care how she did it. She left y'all for a reason. So this is how Courtney's going to do it. So luckily at JLL, there's been no one else who's done this.
Yes.
So I won't be doing it the wrong way, even when I'm making mistakes. It gives you more flexibility and kind of way to learn your way. So it's been really fun. There's been a lot of unknowns, but I feel like I'm now at a place where I'm playing more to my strengths. And I think another thing that like life and work, we spend so much of our time. I mean, we talk about work-life balance, but like it's such a blend.
Oh, sure.
When life events happen at work, I mean, when I joined Little, I was a little whippersnapper, just freshly married. I didn't even have a dog. I had no responsibility. I don't keep plants. I can't keep many of alive. So I have nothing. And then my 8 years when I'm leaving, I'm married, 2 dogs, 2 kids, much more responsibility in my job. And so I feel like I have to keep that same level of achieving.
Sure.
That I've always just been a high achiever and a high performer, and I don't want to let anyone down. But my life is not really I can still be a high performer, but not the way I was. And while I think, again, internally, I had a problem with that, I'm sure people at Little would have been like, that's okay. You can ratchet it down. But I'd set up this persona of super performer Courtney that I'm like, I got to reset.
Yes.
And so I think that's been what's really great at JLL is that I am older and wiser and just kind of took that as an opportunity I was very intentional with kind of the reset of, I have a lot less responsibility in my role. I mean, that sounds really bad, but at at Little, I had 10 people who reported to me. And so there's the people side of it, plus the financials, plus finding new work, staying involved in all the projects you have going on, which for 10 people, there's a million different ones going on. Mm-hmm. There's all the networking stuff. It's kind of, I mean, we would joke that being a studio principal is kind of being a CEO of your own little micro company. You have to do all the things.
Yeah.
And I have a fraction of that at JLL. So I have, when I first was joining, no team. I don't have a team. Mm-hmm. So I'm not responsible for other people's development or success or anything else. And so since I had a lot less responsibility, I could be a lot more intentional with where I was going to focus time, energy, and development to make it so that I'm having the most impact on the group I'm working with.
Sure. So what's a typical, engagement assignment that you work on? How does that start? And walk me through that process.
Yeah. I've learned that none of them are typical, but let's talk in an ideal world. Mm-hmm. In an ideal world, there is a client that our brokers are working with. Let's say that our brokers put them in this, they helped them find this space 7 years ago. And they're like, hey, we're in 25,000 square feet that you put us in 7 years ago. Our lease is coming up in 3 years. We don't know what to do next. And pre-Courtney being there, they'd be like, okay, well, how many people do you have now? And let's talk about your growth. Maybe you probably need, all right, let's go look for 30,000 square feet. So now that I'm there, what they'll do is let's bring in Courtney. Courtney is going to understand your business goals of growth plans. And I mean, if there are, not everyone knows any sort of M&A activity, but like, how are you going to be growing? What are your business goals? And more from like your people business goals. So attracting and retaining, process improvement, like what are the things you're really focused on? And then also engaging your people. So through surveys or focus groups or visioning sessions. to get the full picture of, okay, maybe they do actually need 30,000 square feet, but here's all the data behind it that proves, based on your growth and based on how your people work and based on the flexible work that you are going to allow and promote. Because I think that's the other thing, is that people are like, oh, well, we tell people to come in 4 days a week. And so we still need to be 1-to-1 because we're telling our policy is 4 days a week. That doesn't mean people are doing it. Mm-hmm. So if people are actually only coming in 2 to 3 days a week, are you in support of that? And if you are, then let's work around that, because if might be going down a rabbit hole, but a lot of times we're not recommending to clients that they do a blanket like 1.5 to 1 person to seat ratio. We're saying, okay, look at the job functions of the different people you have. And if you're someone, you think about a design firm, mm-hmm. designers who are always trying to like pull materials, and you're collaborating on projects together. Obviously with Revit, you can work from home. We did it for a long time in COVID. Yeah. But there's a lot of synergy, a lot of collaboration, a lot of efficiency that is lost when you're not together. So maybe those design groups should be in more like 4 days a week. Accounting and maybe like HR functions and more of the administrative type functions probably don't need to be there 4 days a week, because when they're in a spending most of their time in spreadsheets and crunching numbers, and then they get interrupted, you've lost a lot of productivity. Sure. And so we'll talk through that with our clients of, what are you going to support for your people? What works for your business and what works for your people? Okay, that's how we're going to look at your growth. And then also looking at, how has this location been working for you? Like, is it you've loved that you can walk to restaurants, or the other that you can't walk to restaurants? Is the commute terrible for more people than you realized? Or is it that great that you can walk here? Do you need to be closer to a light rail? So we'll look at the whole picture in a pretty quick time frame. So it's not taking months. And then our brokers will use that to then more survey the real estate market, just with a lot more information ready. So they aren't going to just kind of take a stab and show you 20 different properties. Most of them don't meet what you need. They're going to be able to narrow it down. So that is a typical ideal world type scenario.
Yeah. So you basically come in and you analyze the situation, mm-hmm. and you provide a diagnostic, mm-hmm. and then you give it to somebody else, mm-hmm. and then you go and do it again. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you have seen, if during that process, when you start analyzing and looking at things from outside, mm-hmm. if you see things that your clients don't see.
Yes.
Because, a lot of people, they say, oh yeah, we need this, we do that, but they may not see it because they're inside.
That is so common. And this is not even really workplace strategy, but mm-hmm. I went with one of our brokers to go see a client that they had moved into their space at this point, like a year before that. And it's beautiful. It's in South End, adaptive reuse. It's great. And they're walking me around, and there's a huge part in the middle. And they're like, no one's ever using this. And this was kind of like this was like the showcase and everything else. Yeah. And I'm walking through, I'm like, it is painfully quiet. Like, I can hear the receptionist every word she's saying. I'm like, have you considered like white noise or music or anything to kind of make us feel more like a Starbucks? Because it looks like that's what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. And that's not a genius comment.
Sure.
But just like you were saying, because they live in it, they don't necessarily see it. And I think within a couple months, they brought in a vendor to help install white noise. They'd rearrange the furniture a little bit, so there's a bit more like semi-private places, mm-hmm. and it's getting used a lot more. So I think it makes me feel pretty successful, but it is just the nature of humans that you're like, you don't see. This is why you go to a counselor. When I met with a therapist a couple months ago, and she was like, you have all the answers. I'm just going to be asking you questions in a different way to get them out of you. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. We joke that workplace strategy is workplace therapy.
Yes.
And it's workplace therapy. It's workplace therapy. So we get to have a lot of like aha moments that make you feel like, yes, breakthrough.
Yeah.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
So in my mind, I see workplace strategy. It's something that large companies need. What is that threshold when you think a company needs workplace strategy, or is it for everyone?
I would say it's not for everyone, but it's not dependent on size. It's more dependent on, I don't want to say open-mindedness, but I mean, I've worked with a group that's their final square foot number is like 9,500 square feet. Mm-hmm. And it was absolutely worth it. And I think that why it was worth it is that they wanted to change how they work. And I think that that's the driver of success is we want to change. We don't know how to change.
Yeah.
Help us. And I'd say the ones that aren't really a good candidate, like I was talking to someone they're more like a professional services. And after talking to them, I started to realize, I'm like, they just want an updated design. Like they still want to stay all offices, no workstations. They don't want to have like the big work cafe. They don't want to question how they're working today at all. They just want a newer office. And so I think that that's more the deciding factor is, are they open to questioning how they work and rethinking how they work? Yeah.
What do you think about the typical workplace setting that we use today? It's workstations, there is a chair and a table and a computer, and then there is a private office and maybe a little bigger office for the boss and some conference rooms. But that setup is pretty much what we've been using for years, with typewriters, and it's just now it's nicer furniture, maybe cooler settings. But the setting, I say the spatial setting is very similar.
Right.
I always think about workplace, which I love the topic because, a modern human, we live most of our lives inside a workplace. If you worked somewhere, 40 hours a week. What do you think of that typical setting as far as people spending most of their life there? Is it, and there are trends that, let's bring the more hospitality or residential look and feel and things like that, but it's still the same. I think it's spatially.
I think I saw something recently that I hadn't thought of it this way, but it's so true. It's that, my parents' generation, older generations, work was for work. Work was a means of an income. And then you would go to church, or you had synagogue, or you had a community center or something for more of that community involvement. And then with your children, you would meet their parents. You'd meet friends that way. You had a lot of different ways to kind of fill your different needs. So spiritual, financial, family, friends, everything else. Now, people look to work to fill a lot more than just the financial, the means to the end. You're also going to meet your friends there. Some people, they just have a romantic relationship they meet there. Those are the people they go hang out with when they leave the office. And so people are relying so much more on work that it really is that's, I don't know why I found that so profound, even though it's kind of duh.
Yeah, but makes sense.
It does. It makes sense. It's like you used to just go to work and then you went home, and obviously technology changed. There's so many things that change that, but the office, the way that you described it, workstation, office, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it's gotten nicer. And I think the nicer helps, but it it's not going to solve all those things. And so and this is not a new term, but I'm sure you've heard, but an activity-based workplace
Yes.
is, I think, a term that will pretty much always work because you're planning it around activities, not necessarily around furniture, or you don't have to be like, and these are the workstations. It's like, where are you going to do your focused work? That could be a workstation. That could be a pod. That could be a conference room. Like, where are you going to do your focused work? Where are you going to collaborate? Where are you going to socialize? What is the work that you get done? And so I just think there's so much people. I love when everyone's always like, I hate the open office. I'm never going to go sit in the open office. I'm like, well, yeah, I wouldn't want to sit in a row of cubicles either. No one wants that. But there's a way to do it right. I mean, remember the article, I don't know, it's probably been 5 years now. I lost time in COVID. Google got it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, no, Google didn't get it wrong. It's just, you're not Google. Like, you can't apply you can't apply their strategy to your work. They didn't get it wrong, but that's what was working for them. Same thing with like an open office. If you think of like a sea of cubicles, that's not going to work for anyone. I don't think that's going to work for anyone. But it's been really interesting to see how COVID's made people rethink. 90% of call centers are now remote. I'm pretty sure that was the one thing that was always in person. Like, you always had to all be together. Yeah. But because I'm always bothering people and asking questions, there was fraud on my Capital One card, I don't know, 3 months into COVID. Yeah. So I had to call them on customer service, and it's taken them a while. And they're very nice. I was like, can I ask you something? Like, are you at home? Yeah. And he was like, yeah. I was like, how's that working out? Like, is it okay? Is that a struggle? He's like, I freaking love it. Yes. He was like, I probably would have quit this job by now if I didn't get the opportunity to work from home, because I only get like 15-minute breaks, and then you get a 30-minute lunch. And he's like, I just have everything here. And then when I'm done, I'm done. I don't have to drive to go home. I can just go do whatever I want. That was 3 months into COVID. I mean, and that was also a single person. So it's not really like a good pool of data. Sure. But I think it does make so much sense that people were never having call centers. A call center has to be this big cube farm. Yeah. Like, why on earth did that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's the culture of workplace and how we think about workplace. And I really thank COVID, because it was really a moment where we have to question a lot of things, and especially in the workplace. And I think most of the awakening that's happening is that, especially in our society, that I think we're workaholics. Yeah. And work is what we do. It's not who we are. But when you meet somebody, you're like, oh yeah, this is my friend. He's a doctor. Oh yeah, he's an architect. So you seem that you need to qualify your worth immediately by what you do, not by who you are. Right. So I think the workplace has been always focused on what you do, your achievements, what you can, what you can create, and as long as you produce, then your value starts, qualifying in society. And you can do the same things, but I think what that creates is that you start, one, your identity is on what you do, then you're always looking at achieving, which is a never-ending.
You're never going to be satisfied.
Yeah, never. So now, if you look back at what's going to really fulfill the person, and you look at who they are and how do you make them feel good about themselves, they could be doing 3 times the amount of work. But if they feel good about themselves, that's what we all want. Right. If I feel appreciated, I feel valued, I feel loved, I feel that I have meaningful relationships, that's all I want. Right. Everybody wants that. And I think that's where, the work-life balance doesn't exist, because there is no work life.
No, there's all just life. One big thing. Yeah, it's all life
just
now.
Life. It's just sometimes we're working, sometimes we are not.
Right.
And I listened to I think it was a podcast that I listened a long time ago, where they were talking about the future and technology, artificial intelligence, and machines. And they were talking about there's going to be a point where the machines, robots, and technology is going to be so advanced that humans, we don't have to work. All the production and doing in the world is going to be done by machines. The role of a human is you're born in a family and you live your life experiencing relationships and love.
That sounds lovely.
And you don't have to work.
Right.
Machines create food. Machines will heal you. Machines create the environment, and we're just there. You just live. That's it. You don't do things.
When do they think this is going to happen? Not our
I
lifetime.
hope pretty soon. But it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to work. If machines are working, we're just living there.
Well,
So I think this COVID thing is kind of giving us a glimpse of what that is, because people are realizing, I don't have to do this. I can quit this job. I can try it. I can try something else. I can do something that is meaningful. From my perspective, not what society expects me to be or to do or to achieve. I can live in my own terms. I don't have to, but I think that shift, it was gonna take probably generations to get there. But I think the shift is happening slowly.
Absolutely. Microsoft puts out something like the work trends, and in their 2022 work trends, so it's a year old, but I still think it's so relevant. They said people's worth it equation has changed. And I think that's kind of a summarization of what you were saying of, that's not worth it anymore. I don't want this just so I can say I work here and I hold this position. If it's not fulfilling any other need, I can make you have to afford to make a living.
Yeah.
That is that is at the bare minimum, I have to afford to make a living and feed the family. So I will always have to work. But I think that there are plenty of careers and jobs that you can be doing that can meet that need, but fit more into your worth it equation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love that conversation because it's very real. I feel that since Industrial Revolution that created the whole progress in the world, mass production, all the technology and things that we enjoy, the price we paid for that, it was the dehumanization of people, because then it becomes about go to school so you can go to this workplace and be there for 40 years, neglecting your family, neglecting your time, neglecting yourself, your priorities.
Right.
And then at the end, you're going to retire and you made it.
Yeah.
And life got reduced to do that.
Yeah.
It's not the only option, but it's the most common option and the one they teach you that you should do that because everybody's doing it and just go ahead and do it. And we think, that's the only one.
Right.
And then you go do it and then you don't feel good. Then you're frustrated. Then you have to go to doctors. You have to go to therapy. You need to do all these things.
Right.
And everybody's like going around complaining. And of course.
Yeah.
it's not our fault.
No. Well, on that, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How, or not how, do you think that architecture can kill timesheets?
What do you mean?
Do you do a timesheet?
No.
You don't? Okay. So I'd say that every larger firms, you have to do a timesheet.
Yes.
So you are always having to do a timesheet. And that is the killer of it. I understood why it was necessary, but I think it's kind of like what you're saying of you are tracking every hour to make sure that you're getting in all of your hours of your work done and blah, blah, blah. So if you don't have timesheets, I mean, obviously it's small. I know you're a smaller company, but I know it's possible. I don't know the solution.
Yeah.
But if you could solve that.
Well, I think the value of timesheets is that you can measure.
Yeah.
You have something to work. You have data.
Right.
Without timesheets, you don't have data.
Yeah.
Which, it's hard to make decisions without data.
It is. I love data. So you're right. You're right. You're speaking to the heart of me. Okay.
But at the same time, you're measured on, it's your output.
Right.
You're just
you're
like a
to
piece,
get something done.
You're a piece of a machine and your job is to do this. And if this piece doesn't work, I replace it with another piece.
Right.
And that data is going to tell me if that piece is doing it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, it's dehumanized.
Right.
It's just, and I go through that because we have periods, it could be months or weeks where I see that we produce an incredible amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. we're machines. This is
Yeah.
amazing. Sometimes we don't produce much for 2-3 weeks.
Right.
And I used to get nervous when that didn't happen, but I realized we're humans. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're not.
Right.
Sometimes you're energized, sometimes you're not. And that's okay. And it's up and down. But with the measurement, they expect you to always hit this metric.
Right.
And then if you don't hit it, you could be the greatest human in life. But if you don't produce that for that machine, then you're going to get replaced. There is no doubt about that.
Right.
How you feel about yourself and what you're going through might not be that relevant.
Right. Well, I think at the end of the year, you can kind of, again, in a larger firm, I'm probably oversimplifying this, but there has to be a certain money in because there's a certain money out.
Yes.
And then you want to have a profit. So if you can track at least the number of projects, I think at a high level, if you're tracking how much money's coming in, and then you can just look at category of project, and you obviously are knowing how much money is going out. I feel like there are other ways that you could be doing that, but I don't know. I could go down a whole rabbit hole.
Well,
there.
but build profits are always there.
Yep.
To me, the problem is when is this disproportionate distribution of profits. So the higher you are in an organization,
right?
In the pyramid,
yeah,
the profits are gonna be 100 times, 10,000 times,
right,
than whatever is at the base of that pyramid
right.
is, and it's disproportionate.
Yeah.
So is that distribution that sometimes it's just unfair, and the whole weight is at the base. There is no doubt about that. The base is the one that's gonna feel overworked and overwhelmed. The top may feel like that, but because they want to, but they don't have to.
Right.
But it's just the disproportionate distribution of the profits.
I've also I won't keep on this, but I've talked to a couple of our clients have been engineering firms. They also do timesheets.
Yes.
And in listening to some of them in like a focus group or something, I'm like, the groups that do timesheets, they are losing time they could be working by commuting. And in a world where your time spent on something matters more than the product you're delivering.
Yes.
That matters. And so I find that the companies that have timesheets, it matters a lot more, like where people live in relation to the office and how bad the commute is and everything like that. Because I'm like, they truly are having to work more to make up for the time, so they aren't lying on their timesheets.
Yes.
To get the same amount of work done. I'm like, that's just whole concept. I mean, it just, when you say it out loud, it makes absolutely no sense.
Oh, yes, it doesn't. And, 40 hours this week, they're not worth the same as 40 hours next week.
No.
Like if something happened in my personal life that week and I log in 40 hours, if I'm feeling sad, somebody that I'm close to, something happened and I'm concerned and I can't sleep because of something personal, it's not the same as if I'm completely, healthy and everybody that I know is fine. I'm going to work at a different pace.
Right.
So those hours are not even comparable.
But your deadlines, like what you're working towards.
Yes.
That even when personal stuff comes up, you're like, well, if I have to deal with this now, I'm coming out of my work day, I might need to work more tonight to get that done. Or I still know that my deadline is here. I mean, unless there's obviously extenuating circumstances to everything, but you're working towards a deadline. So I don't know if that's an intrinsic thing, but anyway.
No, it's real. There is one thing I always see, and is I love marketing, business development, branding, all that topic, because it's basic human behavior.
Yeah.
So in a buyer-seller relationship, the leverage is always with the buyer, because it's the decision maker.
Right.
You can decide to buy or not to buy, but the seller is just kind of waiting. Hey, pick me. Pick me, and then we try to do all these things so somebody picked us. So when you're in a leverage position, you feel empowered, right? So if you flip the script, even when you're selling, you look at it like this. If I'm gonna, let's say have a potential clients to do projects, right? We're gonna exchange. I'm gonna give them a service. They're gonna give me money. So I switched and I said, I'm buying money. Right? So if I'm gonna buy, let's say $20,000, all right, I'm gonna buy $20,000. And I compared 3 different clients. With those 3 different clients, those $20,000 could be very expensive or very cheap for me.
Mm-hmm.
What am I paying for that?
Right.
And it's the how I feel about myself when I'm doing the work,
Mm-hmm.
the way I relate to that client,
Right.
the way the transaction is going,
Right.
So I can do 3 projects. Each one is $20,000. One could be horrible.
Yeah.
The other one could be amazing.
It's your worth it equation.
Right. Because I'm buying that money.
Right.
So that I always use that when I'm trying to evaluate who do I work with,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it's too expensive and it could be $1 million. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It could be very expensive. And I don't want to buy expensive things. I want to buy things at a good price.
Right.
And to be a good price, what I'm paying, it has a lot of value. But I think we can keep talking about that whole workflow down to the timesheet, because
Right.
it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, when you're doing transactions and in a large corporation, who's doing the work? They didn't make the decision. Who purchased the money was somebody who's not going to do the work, who's
Right.
not going to pay the price for that money.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah,
See, I've learned, I've taken away so much today.
it helps a lot.
It does.
Yeah,
It does help a lot.
cool. Well, tell me a little bit about your own perspective on the future of workplace and even the present. We're in a time where everybody, we're post-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
People are going back to the office. They try, but they're not going. And so people say yes, and different industries and different things. And now there are layoffs, and there is all this real estate, but at the same time, there is all this construction.
Right.
So, there's a lot of mixed messages, and you see articles. And so what do you think is going to happen?
First, I think that you can find an article or a study or a white paper to support anything you want to believe. So there is that, which also makes it hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I try to read all different sides of things. I think that the office will change. I don't ever think that the office will fully disappear. I just think that the purpose of the office has changed. And I was checking this in the car before I was coming in here to see if there's been any change kind of in the labor statistics, because there's still really low unemployment. And I know there's all these announcements about tech layoffs. Unemployment's really low, and there are a lot of companies or industries that are still hiring. So it's not like we have a huge unemployment problem. So people are working. So it's becoming a little bit more of an employer's market. But I think if anything, we're just kind of balancing out more. And I see the office I think people might finally understand the role that the office plays in that. Today, I was talking with a client. We were trying to understand what I'm trying to convince them to do a survey, because I just think there's so much value that comes from that. And I think they see it as, if we ask questions we don't follow through on, I'm like, yeah, but read the questions. They aren't really like that. Anyway, she's like, well, the complaints we're hearing aren't necessarily about the space. And I think people don't realize how much, like you were talking about, how art and technology, architecture, or how like it's part of the human experience. I don't think people realize how much the space is not necessarily the root of so many other problems, but it is you can solve a lot of other problems by solving a problem with your space.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to be moving towards just a more intentional office, where people aren't just saying, 10,000 square feet, this many offices, this many cubes, throw in some conference rooms. I think they're finally going to have to pay attention to, why do we need an office? And I would say that majority of companies still need one. I think there are probably some that don't, but I think that the why and defining that why is going to then drive the whole rest of the conversation. And so that's where I really see, I don't know if that's a cop out, but that's where I see it going, is that I don't think the office is going away is the bottom line. Yeah. It's going to change. Yeah. And it's needed to change.
Is the culture and perspective that people need to have about workplace.
Right.
And then that's going to create some type of effect in the physical world.
Right. Right. And I think it's also just just remembering your own humanity of not everyone is going to think like you or agree with you or anything else, but there are some things about humans that we do all have in common. Yeah. And so don't forget that your own humanity when making decisions for other people. Yeah. And so I think I joke that I'm still just a defiant teenager at heart. Like if you tell me not to do something, then I'm going to be really wanting to do it. And vice versa. If you tell me to do something, I'm going to be like, no. Yeah. I think that when all these companies, like we are calling employees back, like I support that because I need the office to survive. But I also think, are you telling them why you want them back? And is it necessary for all 5,000 of your workers? Or is it really probably only necessary for like 3,500 of your workers? And let's talk about what we can do with those other 1,500. Yeah. Because I think that's where, at least if you read in the news, there's all these companies, we're calling people back, mm-hmm. Which first of all, I think they've been saying that for like 3 years now. Yes. So believe it when I see it. But it'll be really, I think that's where we're starting. They're going to have to be more intentional. They're just going to have to remember their humanity of give people the why. Yeah. You might be dealing with a bunch of defiant teenagers. We all got a lot more defiant during COVID. Yeah. I think my defiance ratcheted up. Sure. Awesome. Well, 1 hour we got in. Sweet.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time. I think I learned a lot, and I tell you that I believe you're a great designer.
Oh, well, thank you. You're kind.
I don't know why you don't recognize that, because design is not artistic expression or something visual. I mean, you're a designer.
Okay. I'll try to change my mindset.
You are, and it's just the way you approach it, because you're doing design thinking. You know what you're doing is designer, and you're designing.
Okay. Yeah. That's just not what I always thought of a designer. No, so I think you're right. Okay. Yeah. I'm just a different kind of designer.
Sure.
Workplace therapy.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Courtney, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
You coming here. I think you're awesome, and I can't wait to see what else are you going to do.
Right back at you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review if you like this content. And find us online at thepowerofdesignpodcast.com. I invite you to join my mission to become a better version of yourself through the power of design.